But I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. Was in Cleveland schools until I was in fourth grade. Then we moved to Shaker, which is a suburb of Cleveland, and was raised in a suburb outside of Cleveland.
When did music come into the picture?
Way before I was even born.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My grandfather started a church. My grandmother taught herself to play. And then when my mom was born, she put her in piano lessons. My mom was like a piano prodigy when she was 3. She's 84. She still plays church every Sunday.
It's amazing.
But she plays my sister, my uncle, my brother. So I didn't really have a choice when I was born. Gospel music was a big part of our lives, plus classical music, because my mom was a classical musician and my uncle. Plus musical theater, my uncle was a musical director. So I was just surrounded, on a Saturday when, you clean the house, it's always got to be some music playing.
Of course.
There's everything from, my mom and my dad used to have what they call card parties, big whist parties.
Oh, yeah.
Where all these fabulous people would show up in these dashikis and afros, it was the 70s, and they'd have the card tables set up, and I'd hear everything from Teddy Pendergrass to, Earth, Wind & Fire to Millie Jackson. I mean, so all that to say, I grew up surrounded by music. My mom put me and my brother in lessons when we were younger, but I grew up with this lovely balance of learning to play, reading music, but also learning by ear in church. So I had both worlds.
Wow. So you were just born right into it.
Right into it. And all my nieces and nephews now all play and sing.
Really? Yeah. See, I come from a non-musical family.
But you have, because it all came to you.
Yeah, well, thank God. So, who were your inspirations as artists? Who did you look to?
Well, my mom, my sister, my uncle were all major influences, and my grandmother, right? But when I look outside of that world, the artists that I loved when I was young, I don't think there was a better time for R&B. Right? So I grew up listening to Earth, Wind & Fire.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
The Emotions.
Yeah.
I love Teddy Pendergrass. I mean, we actually saw him live. Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, the Supremes, Minnie Riperton, Denise Williams,
We had some amazing singers.
Because you had to sing.
Jeffrey Osborne, you had to be able to sing.
Because the technology did not allow you to do anything else.
Right.
There was no tuning, there was no
AI.
Cutting things together.
Yeah.
It was like you had to be able to go from beginning to end. And Nancy Wilson, who also had a famous video footage of her talking about how back in her day you had to be able, because there was an orchestra, you stood in front of them, and there wasn't 20 and 30 takes. It was you got one take.
That's right.
You maybe did it 1 or 2 times, and then you went on.
Yeah.
Right.
And even in the time of analog, the recording process, you had to, you were wasting time otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when did you make that decision that musical theater was going to be your pathway?
It's connected actually to growing up in Shaker. Growing up in Shaker, and especially in the 70s, where art education was considered necessary, vital to young people. So it's very different from today, where it's almost a privilege in certain places. So I grew up, when I moved to Shaker, we had great music programs, choral programs, orchestra, dance, art, everything. And in fourth grade, they took us from the suburbs down to downtown Cleveland to see the national tour of Porgy and Bess. And I was in fourth grade, and I can remember seeing that and seeing these people who looked like me doing this thing. I never heard of opera before. I heard classical music, but not like this. And people who looked like me doing something at such a high level of expertise and artistry and brilliance. And I remember sitting in that seat and going, I want to do that. And because I saw somebody who looked like me, I knew it was possible from the very beginning.
See, we were blessed because growing up in Manhattan and growing up in New York, our parents made sure they took us to all of the Black Broadway plays, the musicals, from The Wiz, Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cook, Pearly, all of that stuff we saw. I saw Fences when it first came out. What made you come to New York?
What's interesting is, even before I ever came to New York, I knew this is where I wanted to be. I don't know how I knew it.
Really?
But I knew that New York City was where I wanted to be. And I never came here until I was auditioning for colleges. And I talked my mom into letting me audition for both of the schools, New York University and Carnegie Mellon in New York. They had them at the same time. And my sister's best friend lived in New Jersey. So I stayed with her in New Jersey, took the PATH train in, and auditioned for NYU, and I auditioned for Carnegie Mellon, and saw my first Broadway show. And just walking around the streets, I mean, this was 1984, so this wasn't like it was like, you know. And I just wandered around, and I just felt like this was right.
Yeah.
Right? New York City is not for everybody.
No, it's not.
It takes a special kind of like...
Especially now.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole nother animal.
Yeah.
And did you, your undergrad work, did you do that in music? What was your musical theater?
I auditioned for Carnegie Mellon because, once again, growing up in the suburbs in a great school program, they would bring recruiters from all the different universities around the country would fly to our school. And then if you went to hear a session, you got out of class. So there was like a trigonometry class I had not studied for. And I said, I'm gonna go see whoever this is over here in this room. Turns out it was Carnegie Mellon. I'd never heard of Carnegie Mellon. Turns out they have at the time and still today one of the top drama schools in the country.
Oh, cool.
And I got the brochure because this is before the internet and all that, and took it home. My mom said, well, they have a session in Pittsburgh in a month. Let's sign up, let's go. And once again, it's that thing. I got out of the car, walked on that campus, and I was like, this is where I want to be. And then I had an audition, which I said I went to New York to audition and then got in. So I studied musical theater for 5 years.
And how long did it take for your quote unquote break to come in New York?
Well, once again, I was lucky in that Carnegie Mellon belonged to a consortium of training programs. So they bring their seniors to New York, and we do like a showcase for agents, casting directors, creatives, all those things. So we came at the end of my senior year to New York. Now they do them in New York and LA, which they didn't do that back then. And I got an agent. From that showcase, I got a call from casting director saying, come down to the public while you're here, because we do the showcase and then we get to stay for like 2 or 3 days to meet people. Come down here. We want you to audition for this piece. Bring your Shakespeare. So I had a Shakespeare monologue. I brought it in, got called back, and it was Shakespeare in the Park. And it was Richard III starring Denzel Washington and Mary Alice. And so...
That must have blown your mind.
Well, it was great because at New York Shakespeare Festival, they did this thing then that I don't know if they still do it, but they would fill the ensembles of their shows with students from Carnegie Mellon, SUNY Purchase, NYU grad, Juilliard. So they were really giving you that first opportunity. And so I graduated from school, moved to New York, and knew I was starting a job. So, yeah.
That's amazing because a lot of people, that whole... cliche, just get on the bus, come to New York, get off, and then take it from there.
Yeah. I can't even remember how I got here. Did I drive? Did we fly? Did we take a bus? I don't even remember. But yeah, my roommate my best friend from home was graduating from SUNY Purchase, which is another great drama program. And we got an apartment together in Long Island City.
Fabulous. So what were the quote unquote highlights? Like, what would you consider your highlights?
Well, I think that first thing, Richard III, to be in a room with Denzel Washington and Mary Alice, who I love from like Sparkle Day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, yes.
And to watch these Black artists work on this classical piece, and met a lot of people that have continued their careers, have moved forward, and got to see them move forward. That was special. After that, I went out on the national tour of Sarafina as one of 2 Americans that they cast in the show. So I literally finished that, went out for 6 months, 7 months. Then I went and did Fences in a regional theater, came in, did a musical off Broadway. It did not go well, and it was gonna close. And the day after it closed, I had an audition for Miss Saigon, which had been opened on Broadway for 3 months. And I went in on that Monday. And that Monday afternoon, they called me and said I started on that Tuesday. So that was my first Broadway show.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's great.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to add to that. that there were many ups and downs. There are many times when I wasn't working, but because I had my choir, because I had other musical outlets, I never felt like I was artistically deficient.
And speaking of your choir, the Broadway Inspirational Voices.
Yes, sir.
That, well, first of all, that's where I come into the picture because you helped me with Project Brownstone in so many ways, just giving me, the background.
On the elliptical.
Yes, on the elliptical, and just the pitfalls and the highs and the lows of having a nonprofit and working with different people. So you don't realize how much you helped.
Thank you.
But tell me all about that for people that don't know.
Broadway Inspirational Voices is a gospel choir, a choir made up of Broadway performers that started in 1994. I had been here since 1990. I came to New York right at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Having grown up, now people have to really remember this is before internet, this is before cable TV. So my life was pretty, small in that what I knew of in Shaker, I knew of in Shaker in Ohio. What I knew of in Pittsburgh, at Carnegie Mellon, I knew in Pittsburgh. But I didn't know anything about the world or what was happening in the world because we had 3 channels, right? And then I got to New York right at the height of this epidemic. And the Broadway community, to its credit, was like, we have to do something. And so at that time, Broadway Cares and Equity Fights AIDS came together and created Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. And so Broadway performers, everyone in the Broadway community, we were doing things, fundraising. We were, we were doing cabarets to raise money and really taking care of our own. And that meant actors, stage managers, stage hands, musicians, anybody within our community who needed help. Whether that was helping them to get to doctor's appointments or medication or food delivery, those kind of things. And so I did a couple cabarets and we were fundraising, but it didn't feel like what needed to be attended to was being attended to, which was a spiritual, emotional, psychological toll of so much loss. And so it was, I decided I wanted to do something with gospel music. I knew that gospel music for me had been a part of my life since, like I said, before I was born. It's always been there. But I knew that separate from religious dogma, the music carries a power.
Yeah, it does.
It just does because of what it's come from, right? And so I knew that if I could bring together some Broadway performers and we could just do a concert. And I wanted it to be diverse because I wanted it to reflect the audience, which would be mostly theater folks. And that first year was just, it was incredibly powerful. And it became and it was a fundraiser for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And so for the next 5 years, we did fundraisers every year. And then it started to expand. And then people wanted us to do concerts. And they wanted us to do TV appearances and do recording sessions. And so at first we became an LLC. And then we realized we wanted to do more outreach within the community.
Right.
So then we became a 501c3. So we had this arm that was performance. And then we had this arm that was outreach.
Nice.
Right? And so we have these long-standing relationships and outreach programs that we built with Ronald McDonald House New York, with Covenant House New York, and then also with Covenant House International, and then with PS1 Music Prep up in Spanish Harlem. So it still goes on today. This year is our 30th anniversary. I stepped down in 2021, so they have a new artistic director, a new executive director, and I have really said, take it where you're going to take it, and they've taken it to another level. And we're celebrating our 30th anniversary on April 7th, and they're actually honoring me and Tom Viola, who was the executive director of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS until 3 months ago, since its inception, because we really came together at the same time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So now you are working more so in academia.
It's a time.
Yeah, and how has that been? Because I know, well, from the elliptical,
Yes.
I know some things,
Yes.
and we've been through 3 different scenarios.
Yeah. So I've been working as an actor and having my choir and as a musician, composer, arranger for like 30 years. And I was out on the national tour of Rent because I'd done it on Broadway twice, and then I did an international tour. And then I was like, I'm really that quiet voice that speaks to you, not the loud one that's like, now I'm going to do that. No, it's that quiet one that catches you when you're not thinking about nothing.
Right.
And the voice said, I'm really ready to move to whatever the next part of my life is going to be. And I got a call. We were starting this new musical theater program at NYU. Would you come and apply for this position? I went in when the tour was over. I met with the team, with the committee, the search committee, and then just kept moving up until I was finally meeting with the dean of Tisch School of the Arts. And I got the job, and it was to be the head of the vocal performance for this new studio called the New Studio on Broadway, musical theater. And did that for 10 years. COVID hit. I sat at my dining room table and talked for a year. And then in the middle of that, I got an offer to chair the Department of Musical Theater at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So never in a million years did I ever think that I would leave New York City, and least of all, move back to the Midwest where I was from. Did that for 2 years, and then got a call about applying for a position at Howard. Because my dear friend Felicia Shaw was the dean of the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts. Applied for that position, went through the whole process, got it. Was there for almost 2 years, and then got a call and an offer to come back to NYU. So now
it's like a full circle.
Yeah. But I'm not in musical theater. I'm a tenured professor in art and public policy.
Wow.
And the executive director of collaboration and performance for Tisch School of the Arts. So,
I'm so impressed.
We're moving on up.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, so it's good. And it intersects the things that I'm really passionate about, how we look at art and art making, specifically for me, through the African American lens, because specifically looking at it through music, it is our music that came with us, the traditions, both formal and informal, that traveled with us from West Africa. That became the foundation of the music we created here. That became the foundation for all music that was created here, that we created.
Right,
Everything from spirituals and sorrow songs to classic blues, country blues, to jazz, to pop, to rock and roll, R&B. All of those were created, come from us, right? And so looking at the world, because I think this is so important right now as we are in a battle for the, the spiritual, psychological soul of our country. How does art play a part? So going back and looking at how artists and art makers in specific periods, when specific policies were being created, either for or against them, how they use their art to give voice to their lived experience, right? To speak about the world in which they live, to be seen. Because
what's funny is that it's all still relevant and it's speaking to now.
Yes, but so many people don't know it.
Yeah.
And in our own community, so many people we don't know our own history. And that is intentional.
Yeah, of course.
Right? I have this wonderful, I follow on Instagram, Black History. And almost every day there's a new thing about a new...
I think I follow that also. It's amazing that we never knew.
Could you imagine?
People that have done some of the most amazing things and we never knew anything about it.
Could you imagine if not just young Black boys and girls, but all young children, because that's important too.
Right.
We're taught that history. It's hard to demean someone or really lean into this idea of someone being less when they have that much brilliance.
Yeah, well, that's why they want to keep us down, because that's what they're afraid of, our brilliance.
Right.
But that leads me to this next question. You have had what I would consider a spectacular journey. What would you advise a young kid that wants to be in the arts? What would you advise them? What would you say target?
Well, first of all, I would say today there is so much information coming at young people, at their minds, through all the social media platforms and everything. But that doesn't mean that they know their history.
Right.
So the first thing I would say is be curious about what came before you. If you like an artist, for example, let's say you like, is it Doechii? Is that her name?
Oh, yeah.
So who did she follow? And keep going back because she has artists that she names, right?
She definitely has a reference point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And keep going back so that you learn the brilliance of the people, because sometimes I feel like we've bought into today this kind of...
I call it fast food.
Yes, fast food.
Yeah.
Right. And I think young folks today, if you really want to explore your artistry, you got to know what came before you, and you have to know that it is a journey, not a destination, right?
And also, it's like trying to make a cake. You can't just plop and have a cake. There are ingredients. There are ways to make those ingredients work. You have to light the ovens a certain temperature for it to actually work.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids don't know that. But I also, in some weird way, blame these reality shows that we have.
Oh, Earl.
I know. That's
I agree 100%. And it's not that it's not that I don't think they know. I think that their minds have been wired differently from ours.
Yeah.
Because of the way that information comes at them, but
it's
also
instantaneous.
And then it goes away.
Right.
And also, if I have a question, I hit a button and there's the answer. As opposed to when we were coming up,
we had to find out.
You had to go to the library, or you had to do. So our brains were more process driven, right? Now that's part of it. I agree. A lot of these reality TV shows have, along with certain people in our political sphere, have normalized bad behavior.
Yes.
And made it so that you can be famous for doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right? And which goes back to when we started talking about recording artists of, the 70s and even into the 80s, where you had to be able to sing. There was no auto-tune.
Right.
You had to be able to sing. Now they can make an artist in a recording studio.
And quiet as it's kept, a lot of these people are made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more about the look and the whole package than it is about, there are not many artists who can actually get on a stage like Beyonce and do a 2.5-hour show, let alone sing live the whole time, dance live, and have a full concept that harkens back. She's a perfect example of knowing her legacy and bringing her legacy with her. This whole idea around her Cowboy Carter and people being up in arms about...
Oh, that was crazy about her doing country music. We are country music.
We created country music, right?
Of course.
And Rihanna Gaddens, I think her name is, who's a banjo player, and she does a whole thing on the history of the banjo coming from West Africa, right? And so once again, if you don't know that information, if nobody's telling you that, then you're thinking it's made somewhere.
And then you're going to buy into those stupid Instagram trolls that say she doesn't belong in country music. What does she know?
Right.
Yeah. And what I find also about like a lot of the musicians now, especially because of the reality TVs, is that they are great technicians, but they're not artists.
Yeah. You have to not only have the technique, you also have to feel. And
soul.
Yeah.
Because you can have a broke down voice, but if you got the soul and you can bring it, there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it because we feel it.
Yeah.
Right? You can have the most beautiful voice and I can feel nothing. You can have half as much talent, but know how to tell a story and to live an experience.
I could name a few people that I feel like that, but I'm not going to be
you're not going to be shady boots, right? But we'll wait till the camera's off and we'll talk about these people. But that's, the whole purpose of art is to lift up the human experience.
Yeah.
And if you can't bring humanity to what you're doing, then it's hollow.
Yeah. And that's what you have a lot of. Like I said, they sound amazing, but there's nothing behind it.
Yeah, and you know what else is that nowadays a lot of young artists, and I'm not no shade. I can't do what they do, and I celebrate them for what they do. But a lot of what they've grown up on is a made up sound, a sound that is not the human sound.
It's not the human voice,
and they've learned to mimic that in their singing.
Because it's really funny you say that, because I can't even sing along to a lot of this stuff because it doesn't seem natural to me.
It's not a natural sound. It's been
auto-tuned and manipulated.
Manipulated, right. And so we have a whole generation of artists who are growing up hearing that and mimicking that, which is not the natural sound of the voice. Right. So you can get a groove and a bop, but it's very rarely that you hear a song today that makes you feel something.
Right. And that there's a real voice behind it.
Yeah. You get the groove and that gives you something, right? But storytelling,
and And then also talking up under people's clothes all the time. That to me is just like,
See, now they're turning into old folks now.
yeah, it's just like really,
Yeah.
and half naked. It's like really, is that what you got to do to get some, to get attention?
Yeah. But
It's
what feeds
sad.
it? Yeah, it's
Right.
what feeds it. You know, we go back one of my favorite voices of all time is Gladys Knight.
Yeah.
You can't help but feel something when she sings.
That's right.
Right? And those voices, and on the other, Aretha Franklin, another one, right? Diana Ross, right? But these folks, they I remember hearing stories about when they would be on tour, when the Motown tour would be on, and they would all watch each other in the wings, study each other so they can get better, and they used each other to deepen and expand their artistry. Today, it's so self-centered. It's so It's so as my friend calls it, navel gazing, right? What story do you want to tell? How do you want to lift up the human experience? And how are we not buying into the stereotypes that have been laid out for us to say this is all we are or this is all we can do? That's why when you have someone like a Beyonce, or what's the one I said who just won Best Artist? Doechii. Who is doing something different with their art, they stick out. Yeah. But for every one of them, there are 20, 30 who are doing the same thing that we're going to hear about them for a year.
And you know who I love? I love Money Long. There's something about her that I find is very real.
Yes.
And she's a great writer. So, I mean, she's somebody that I like, wow.
Yeah.
When I saw her, I was like, okay, this girl's got it.
Yeah. And I bet you if you asked her, who are her,
she's going to give you a whole history.
She's going to take you
and
all the way
she knows the history.
Yes. And it's not right about moving it forward. Every generation has moved it forward.
Yeah.
But you moved it forward on the shoulders of. You didn't move it forward with nothing underneath you.
Right.
And so today the
acting
ego
like you created it.
Yes. And ain't nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think, like you said, these reality shows that have made people famous for nothing has perpetuated this idea that you don't have to work at something, right? That it doesn't take real effort over a period of time. Jennifer Lewis says, the elevator to success is broken, use the stairs. There is something about the success and the failure, the 2 steps forward, the 10 steps back, that not only builds a skill,
and the heartbreak of it.
Yes, but it builds resilience.
Because you come back fighting even more.
Yes. And resilience is necessary, not just to be an artist, but to live. And I find so often that we are losing that, right? So it's either got to be right or perfect, or it's got to happen right away, or I don't want to do it, or it's got to be. And that's because, once again, the social media puts out this idea of perfection that doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
People curate the whole experience, and they think that that's real, and it's not.
And the veil.
How many artists? And I'm just thinking, just in terms of song, singing, recording artists, have we seen have 20, 30, 40, 50-year careers, right? How many artists of today can you say
are going to be around?
Or who've been around for 10 years,
right.
or 20 years? Beyonce, you know what I'm saying? There's not as many because it takes real skill to be able to sustain that, and you have to take care of your body, you have to take care of your voice. You got to, there are things you have to do. Right. But if you don't have
and also you have to be comfortable with nothing. You have to be comfortable with things just not working out.
Yeah.
And be able to still do your art. And that sometimes your art will transition to something else, but the art's still in it because that's who you are.
Right.
Not what someone made you into.
Right.
So that brings my next question.
Oh, okay.
What are you presently working on?
One of the great things about being a professor is that I have a faculty research fund. So that allows me to be able to go into the studio and to work with people, work on new things. When I was at Howard, I got 2 grants and a show that I actually wrote. We actually were able to do a full production of. And it was great for the students because they got to work on a new piece of material that centered the African American experience. And it gave me an opportunity to work on my music. I have 1 play and 1 musical that once I get acclimated to my new job, I'm going to go back into writing. But I am going to go back into the studio in the next month or so and record 1 gospel thing that I've done and 1 arrangement of a jazz thing that I've done. Just so I keep keep those muscles.
It's that
going.
whole thing about you have to embody it. It is who you are.
Right.
All right, this is one of those existential kind of questions.
Right.
What do you consider success? What does success mean to you? How do you define it?
For me, success. Well, it depends on what form of success you're talking about. Are you talking about in terms of art and the work that you do? Because I consider being loved, having great friendships, having a family that loves me and I love them as being successful.
Yeah.
I think of getting to do the thing that I love to do is successful. I think being able to make a living at the thing that I do, and I'm not talking about gazillions of dollars, I'm talking about that I can live the kind of life that I want to live is successful. That I am lucky enough to be able to continue to engage my art as it evolves is successful. That everything that I have dreamed and more has happened. And sometimes it was things that I didn't even think. It's like I've been blessed, but and that is that humility that I think we all have to have. But I also have worked and continue to work hard. Sometimes I have to kind of talk myself out of that negative speak, right?
We've had that conversation on the elliptical.
I don't have to fuel my work. I don't have to fuel how I work, how hard I work with negative speak.
And also, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone.
Yeah. Only what I want to say with my art and what I want to give to the world that in some way, hopefully, will touch someone else's life. What will lift up the human experience as I think it is, as I know it to be.
Because my thing is that I want to, whatever it is that I do, that it heals someone. That it actually helps them.
And that was why BIV, that was the main reason. And the reason why it continues to thrive, I think, is because when people come together and hear those voices, when they come together to sing, that it actually touches somebody.
Yeah.
And places that have been broken are allowed to come back together.
So the next, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think first and foremost, that I was a good person.
Yeah.
Right? We know a lot of great artists.
Not so nice.
I've met some idols. And I had to really work hard and evolve my spiritualness to separate them.
Yeah.
So to be known as a good person. That with my art, that I inspired someone, that I let someone know that they were seen. Nothing makes me happier. I don't care about being recognized, but it touches me when it's a young African-American artist who's, specifically male artist, who's like, I saw you in, or I heard you on, and that's the reason, because I had those people.
Right.
Right? So if I can be a cog in that machine, if I can be a touch point in that line, that's wonderful. And that I leave something behind artistically that will last the test of time.
There you go.